Thank you, friends. What does it take for us to solve global challenges? Because we have global challenges. Time and again, we have been taught, although some outside this room still haven't learned the lesson, that none of us are safe until all of us are safe from pandemics and climate change and conflict and inequality. Our world is too interconnected, our planet too small for faraway civilizations to rise and fall unnoticed by people continents away. What does it take? Well, we are all here because all of us believe that at least part of the solution is effective international institutions. But what does it take for institutions to be successful? I want to make the case that no institutions, whether families or village-level collectives or nation-states or even global institutions, can thrive unless they sit on top of a community of belonging. A strange phenomenon in international affairs is that people who know full well that their national institutions will fail if there is no sense of citizenship at the national level. Imagine that that is no longer true at the international level. They are wrong. What holds back international cooperation more than anything is that governments who govern these institutions are sent there with a mandate, democratic or otherwise, that does not sufficiently demand, urge, insist that they play collaboratively when they get there. It ought to be politically impossible in any nation for a leader to tell their people that they are withdrawing from the World Health Organization. It ought to be just as politically impossible as it would be to say that we're shutting down public hospitals in that country. And yet, for exiting the World Health Organization to become as politically impossible as shutting down public hospitals, citizens of countries need to carry alongside their national identities, their local identities, their family and professional identities, a sense of belonging to humanity at large. This is a fundamental truth of all institutions. It's a basic fact of psychology. How far away are we from that? I would like, if I may, to carry out an experiment with you very much in the vein of the late, great Hans Rosling. I would like you to open your phones, capture this QR code, and use it to click through to the survey that you'll find. It will ask you to guess what proportion of the global public agree with three crucial questions that measure their sense of belonging in today's global community. Please go ahead and do that now. You see, every year as part of the Global Solidarity Report, which my think tank Global Nation publishes, we survey 22,000 people in 31 countries around the world, high income, lower income, on every continent, to understand to what extent they agree or disagree with being a citizen of the world. And we want to push them to see if they're prepared to make a strong statement. So we ask whether they feel more a citizen of the world even than of their own country, whether they want their taxes to go towards solving global problems, and whether for issues like environmental pollution, they want international institutions to have enforcement powers to keep countries honest to the agreements that they make. Now, it's easy to see that if citizens everywhere strongly agreed with these statements, this would increase the pressure on governments to act cooperatively, to fund international organizations and efforts to tackle global problems, and also to give those institutions the mandates that they need. So you've had a minute now to answer the survey. I hope that a few people have. Let's see the results. Wow, you're an optimistic bunch. You think that 52% of people consider themselves more a citizen of the world than the country they live in. You think that half of people want their taxes to go towards solving global problems, and that 70% of the world's population think that international institutions should have enforcement power. I have to say, in preparing this, I was expecting to tell you that you were a pessimistic bunch reading the news, but I love the optimism in this room at the UNA. Yes. So now let's see what the real results are. It's not that bad. There was certainly a response to this that would have allowed me to tell you it's not as bad as you thought, but it is much less. So as you can see, 31% of people consider themselves a citizen of the world, more than the country they live in. 31%, the same proportion, want their taxes to solve global problems. And 52%, more than half, think that for environmental pollution at least, we should have enforcement powers. But now for the really discomforting news. 31%, or even the 50% that you suggested, is not enough if we want to have the kind of strong institutions at the international level that we are used to in our countries. More than 90% of people in most countries say that they feel strongly affiliated with their country. So we are far away from where we would need to be to have the kind of strong institutions that global problems require. But more worryingly, the proportion agreeing with these three statements has significantly declined just in the last year, from 2024 to 2025. This is not merely an artifact of the data. Something worrying is going on. You see, during the turbulent 2010s, when it became fashionable to declare globalization and global citizenship dead, public opinions showed remarkable resilience when it came to these issues. It's true that in some countries, anti-globalists made the headlines and even won elections, but fundamentally the public had not changed their minds. But a decade into that turbulence, things are starting to shift. This may look like a small year-on-year fall, but it's robust across all three questions, across all different income levels of countries, across men and women, across every socioeconomic group. And so we can say that that's not random. We are starting to lose hearts and minds. Part of the problem is that younger generations feel less internationalist than their elders. Many of us have got used to the idea that every generation is more open to the world than their parents, and that in fact is true when it goes from boomers to Generation X, and from Generation X to millennials. But Gen Z has the same level of global citizenship as the boomers, perhaps because they have come of age, like that older generation, at a time that feels very much like a new Cold War. One of the astonishing findings in our data is, as you amazingly accurately predicted, is that over the last few decades, a majority of people in almost every country have said that they agree with international organizations having enforcement powers. But in the last year alone, in over a quarter of the countries surveyed, that has dropped from over a half to less than a half. And you can see some really significant declines, including in this country, just in the last year. Another worrying trend is the increase in the proportion of people who say that they strongly disagree with the statements. This points to a relatively small but growing group of hardline minority who see international cooperation Thanks, Mohammed. I forgot we had planned that. Who see international cooperation not just as not a good thing, nor even as some faraway thing they don't care about. And we know a lot of people think about that, but actually who see it as a clear and present danger. But I want to end on a positive note when it comes to this data. The public is not retreating from internationalism everywhere. It's really interesting to consider those countries where it is starkly on the rise, China and Saudi Arabia, and to think about why that might be. But my time is limited, so I want to leave you with a suggestion about how we can build trust and rebuild trust. I believe that the single biggest issue that is eroding trust in our societies across the world is the growth in inequality, and especially in wealth inequality. The extraordinary growth in wealth inequality in recent years has undermined trust in society, and because of that in government, and because of that, indeed, in international institutions. And of course, many politicians who are unwilling or unable to tackle inequality often blame international institutions as a scapegoat for the anger that results. But ironically, wealth inequality is an issue that can only be tackled by global agreement. Financialized wealth is just as slippery as carbon dioxide and as viruses in the fact that it knows no borders. So it must have nowhere to hide from taxation if it is to be taxed effectively anywhere. And if international cooperation can help us solve this greatest issue of our time, which will only get far worse with the rise of artificial intelligence, then people can come to believe again in these international institutions. And if that feels so far away, so impossible, then ask yourself this: how far away are we from an American president being elected on a platform of taxing wealth? Over there in that country, already in local and state elections, people are wiping the floor with landslides on this issue. And if America joined with the dozens of countries who are already working hard and calling for this, Brazil making it a key part of their G20, then we could have a reality of international cooperation on wealth tax, not just in our lifetimes, but soon. So I urge you to give whatever support you can to the UN Tax Convention, and also to lend your voices to this issue. Because sometimes the darkest moments come just before the dawn. Thank you.